it's like 5 seconds. Hi, I think we're live. Hi, I'm Matt with Schematical, and clearly I did something to knock this camera into the wrong angle, but welcome to CTO Coffee Hour. I'm your host, Matt Lee with Schematical, and with me, as always, is Dominic. Let's see if I move the microphone here. That'll be a little better for you.
There we go. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. So, Dominic, we both dabbled in a little bit of real estate type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Take it you're familiar with the term off-market real estate?
I've tried and failed at that, but yes, I'm familiar with it.
Well, uh, to those of you that aren't super versed with that, you generally, once a piece of real estate is listed on a market, then it becomes commoditized. It's subject to the market's prices, right? But if you're looking for a good deal, you want to find something that isn't listed on a public marketplace because the user, the person selling it, hasn't bothered list it. Maybe they're not a savvy, seller. Maybe something's wrong with it. Maybe, they hadn't really been thinking about selling it. It wasn't,
Maybe they're a hoarder and they don't want to show their house to the public or any number of different things.
yeah,
Absolutely.
they didn't understand the value of the property.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that, that works out in some certain ways, and also, I mean, yeah. So right now we've got this AI gold rush, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's training with what we'll call on market data. So the sum total of Wikipedia and Reddit and everything else that's on.
Well, let's say the publicly facing Reddit, because there could be an argument made that the private Reddit data is very much off-market data.
I can give you that. Okay, so that's good. Description, but it trains fairly generic stuff. You don't have an edge against anybody else. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're training against Google and Anthropic and all these other guys. There's no edge there. So you're kind of at a disadvantage because they have a
Yep.
huge scale advantage.
Everybody has access to the same public data sources, essentially, that are out there on the publicly addressable internet.
Yes. And so now I believe there's an opportunity for the niches. So these giant juggernauts, you're never going to compete against them. But you could find a niche where there's data that is not publicly available. It's off market, but it's valuable all the same. So an example might be if you had, a Fitbit of some type for a very specific type of sport, and you've been tracking all these data points, and you can then train this thing. These have to have all these tagged set of data points, and then you can train a model, probably not an LLM, but some type of model, a embedding model or classifier or something like that, to to forecast and interesting things that could be used.
Well, could another? And I mean, the first example that comes to my mind broadly is e-commerce companies. They've got purchase history. Of course, you could scrape the products. Amazon, for example, they have purchase history of all of their customers, and that is hugely valuable if you were to want to figure out something to sell to anybody on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Google is definitely consuming a lot of that information, whatever you feed it in Google Analytics. But,
Mm-hmm.
are they actually acting on that? And do they actually know the full scope of things there? And can they actually put it to action? Well, they might not be able to.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily we can, using some of the techniques I've been working on lately. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I could see something like, a less obvious example might be, let's say you own a couple dozen dental clinics. You perhaps could use that data to dramatically increase your revenues by
It,
learning more about your customers and touching them at the right times. Or
it,
not,
it-
not
that
the same. Sorry, go for it.
No, let me riff off of that because you're absolutely right. If you even if you didn't own the dentistry, but you somehow had the rights to millions of dental records and shots of cavity, not cavity,
Mhm.
then you could definitely train an AI to basically be an AI radiologist at that point.
Mhm.
And they are doing it. That's almost so mainstream that it's not doesn't qualify as off market, but it could. But I'm trying to think of like other things. I'm trying to think of there's niches where it's not because healthcare is going to be a big one right now.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, AWS Nova just became HIPAA compliant. So I'm just saying, like they're putting
Mm.
AI in everything. Actually, just had a
Well, I
conversation
mean,
with
think
an
about maybe even apartments.com and their back end data to know what's the likelihood of somebody renting an apartment or this apartment or that apartment. That could be valuable, maybe not to real or, apartments.com alone, but perhaps to real estate developers saying, where is the best place to put what category of apartment, super luxury, medium luxury, standard, affordable housing based upon the rental trends based upon apartment.com data.
Yeah, that's a good one. Another one would be if you had access to a ton of data on, like, say, energy production, and you
Mhm.
could, take a look at either seismic, underground imagery, or
Mm.
satellite imagery, to take a look and be like, hey, this area right here, based on today, that affects the futures of this,
Mhm.
production in here, which
Well,
then we can trade on. So it's
I,
all
I
that
knew
data
there
right there.
I knew there was a company that was actually taking satellite data and looking in the spring at the crop coverage and the particular UV light reflections that came off of the various leaves at various stages to predict what the yield was going to be months in advance of what the yield actually was. And of course, there could be variance, there could be a drought, other things, but based upon historical data, they were playing the futures market based upon satellite imagery of crop data.
Yeah, that's I got a friend that's in farmers insurance, and he's more on the studying side, not the selling it side, but the just to go out there and be like, hey, here's the damage and all that stuff.
Mm,
And I'm like, what can I do? Like, could we partner on something where we could be able to forecast risks models that would decrease their risks significantly. I mean, and
mm,
ideally, also help the farmers, because we'd be like, this year is going to be a real bad year for flooding. Go buy a bunch of sandbags and make sure you're ready. You're diverted,
Well,
you've
it
done
is a
everything you can.
super El Nino, La Nina, El Nino year this year. So there's going to be some weird things. That's not related to this at all. But that is looking at historical data that's public, not off market.
Right. Well, so that, yeah, but the data of basically how it actually affects these crops and whatnot, on a
Mm,
not just like on a, okay, like the sum total of the entire industry, this is what we're doing, like you can see this farm at this lat long, the crops have this effect or that effect, or we the yields in this
mm,
corner of the yard, we of the field, are 20% less than this, and just being able to zero in and not just be so generic, and have very specific individual predictions for each individual, I
mm,
mean, row of crops,
mm.
that and being able to sum that up instead of just saying, yeah,
Huh.
we're just going to do the average of all this together. It could be very powerful.
So I don't know if this would be considered off market data, but this would be more of a massive data aggregation game per se. Pre foreclosures, every single county puts out tax records, et cetera. If you could find a way across the country to look at that, you could do some pretty powerful things with that as well. But that would require you to aggregate a data set that the sum effect of that data set is it's essentially, uh, I don't want to call it off market, but it's so complete that nobody else can compete with it. And that's something similar, different but similar, I would think.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, wager Google's scale, if it's publicly available, they could do something with that. I mean, they got to
Mm,
be, having LLMs parse these things and standardize them in a format that they can handle. So again, I'm less excited about that one, but I mean, I can see it having some value. I think real estate's such a saturated niche. I don't know if that's
mm,
something I want to try and compete in at scale. But with that said, I think we could find something. I'm trying to, the energy markets I find extremely fascinating right now, and you end up with these interesting, like, little niche, especially as the global supply chains are being kind of moved around. You end up with these little niche markets where they're being powered in different ways. I mean, so much. Yeah, there's such an interesting bubbles. Everything's bouncing off each other. Everything ripples when you change one thing, like dropping a pebble in a pond, where all of a sudden now people are having to go back to older type means of heating from the cleaner ones in a lot of ways because of various reasons. But they're burning fossil fuels, and so now you've, or not even fossil fuels, you're burning just wood, because they're
mm,
trying to keep their house warm in the winter. It's like, okay, well then where are they getting the wood from? And just being able to
mm.
understand kind of how it all interacts with each other. and the various pipelines. Oh my gosh, I'm just ranting right now, but you
Mm.
kind of get the idea.
So off-market data. Where does this stuff live? What are some of your ideas insofar as people that may or may not have this data? Who do you think could be out there holding on to it that isn't using it?
If you've been tracking, user sales as an example, and you haven't actually put that, to work for you, or you've been tracking, like I said, imagery or stats on cornfields or something like that, and you've got enough where you can have a kind of a right and wrong. You can see, hey,
Mhm.
this weather pattern resulted in this type of field. If you've got that data, it's just gathering dust, or
Mhm.
you don't have that data, but you have the means to collect that data, and you could start collecting it at a rapid pace with enough scale, enough people, or enough data points that we can actually
Mhm.
train something on it. We could put that to work. So that I'd love
Mhm.
to talk to anybody that's doing, collecting, has the ability, has access to that data, is collecting that data, would like to be collecting that data, and wants to actually do something actionable. Because it's not actionable, then
Mhm.
it's not, doesn't make a lot of sense. But if we can actually use it to forecast something, to prevent, farm from burning down, or all sorts of things, that's, there's value in that, and I think we can do some very interesting things with that. And people more and more will be doing that all over the place. I think the mainstream market for this is a little saturated, but there's all
Mhm.
sorts of interesting little niche places where we can execute, and I intend to find those and help the people that have that data
Mhm.
to use it to benefit themselves, their communities, mankind, whatever. I don't want to be too noble here, but make a couple bucks
Yeah.
while doing it, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my brain is spinning. Like U-Haul has massive amounts of data. I'm sure they're using it. Mid-sized restaurant franchises across their various locations, et cetera.
That's
Not
it.
just forecasting sales, but digging deeper into it, and maybe new product development or product optimization or other things like that.
U-Haul is an interesting one. You do the same thing with travel, but what if you could predict the likelihood that someone was going to not show up with the U-Haul on time, so you could clean it, so then the next
Mm.
person is totally screwed over when their U-Haul is just not at the location, and you could then instead ship another U-Haul there and say we're
Mm.
rerouting another one from this place to that place. You do the same thing with rental cars. You can
Mhm.
do the same thing with planes. I mean, that'd be, what if you knew that there was a high probability that the flight you're about to get on is going to be delayed by 2 hours, but you could spend that time working or something like that?
Or
It's,
getting a charter flight, and that's what led to Virgin Airlines.
yeah, exactly. Or they could, predict that, hey, this plane's likely to have maintenance. Let's have another one ready to go,
Mhm.
and then this other one's got a near zero chance of having any delays. We don't need to have an extra
Mm.
one ready to go there. That you could really increase
Or
customer satisfaction there.
or how could you even use that, dare I say, on the modern battlefield?
Yeah, I suppose so.
I'm
Sometimes,
sure that's already being thoroughly researched,
yeah,
and that private data will almost certainly remain private data.
yeah, could be. It's a dark place to go with this.
Well, I mean, my geography brings this just front of mind right now. So
Yeah, understandable. So let's try and turn this thing around.
real estate.
Um, yeah,
I mean,
it's
that ties
the
into U-Haul. It's not just getting the U-Haul there, but where are they going? What are they doing? What are the migration patterns? And what does that mean? Again, that could tie back into real estate as well. I mean, all these things could be interconnected, and you need to see. I believe U-Haul already releases its data on just the general migration patterns year by year. It's a
mhm,
pretty, I mean, they're not a monopoly, but they're pretty darn close insofar as interstate moves goes.
right. No, and luckily for all of us trying to find off-market data and do something with it to find a niche to thrive in, the techniques of training these AI models are very well fleshed out by the big guys. They're
Mhm.
publicly, like I've trained several so far this month. Just still May, yeah, it's still May. So yeah, so it's not rocket science to actually put
Mhm.
that data to work. You just have to know how to do it, and the techniques for doing it are become very well documented. So it's not no longer like, oh, who can come up with the best technique for it. I mean, there's going to be some of that competition, but like we can
Mhm.
get a technique that could be 90% of the way there, 99% of the way there, and but we just need the data. You need the
Mhm.
data and the use case to put it to work, and there you go. So with that said, unless you have any closing thoughts, I think that's a good note to end on.
I agree.
All right. Well, everybody have a great day. If you're looking for help, of this type of service, you can find me at schematical.com, and or just reach out to me directly on whatever platform you've got, and I'm happy to work with you. This is kind of what I do. So with that said, have a great day.
See y'all.
Sorry, it takes me several